What I'm going to do right now is just give you an introduction to what we are going to do today. And good. So I will give you a little overview about the past of this conference and the future of this conference. First, let me get the organization stuff out of the way. These are the organizers. So it's myself, it's Roger Molina, and especially Isabel Mireles, who is an associate professor at Northeastern University for Art and Design. So she's an information design professor who does a lot of work in this circumstance, especially regarding the editing of the articles and also setting up the symposium. And we also like to thank very much Christian Hueb, who is a complex systems scientist here at Northwestern and an electronic musician. And he's very experienced with doing events, and that's, his work is responsible for having the awesome setup here, so it's everything all set. These are our sponsors, and we're very proud of that we have Northeastern and Northwestern on the same sheet of paper. Not only that, we have multiple colleges, Arts of Media and Design and Science in Northeastern. The Northwestern McCormick School of Engineering is actually headed by Dean Otinho, who was a painter who then basically became a chemist because he found out some interesting property, going on to found the Northwestern Institute for Complex Systems, without which NetSci wouldn't happen. So there's an artist in the back of this. Then I'm an ETH, so the flight was paid there. UT Dallas is where Roger is based right now and where I'm going to be based in January. And of course, without Leonardo, nothing would work. This is our call for paper, and the interesting thing about this call for paper is that we didn't change it much in the last 3 years. And we consider it as a kind of a stable radar beacon. And basically, this is the short version of it. So we aim to foster cross-disciplinary research on complex systems within and with the help of arts and humanities. So scientists coming to the arts and humanities asking questions, and arts and humanities people basically pushing the field forward with angles which the natural science doesn't come up by itself. This is the radar return. This is actually the abstract of abstracts. And I'm also really happy with that this year because, as you can see, there is not the usual kind of network stuff like clustering, coefficient, degree distribution, whatever, as the most frequent word. But there is actually the really interesting stuff like evolution, model, diffusion, structure, and time, and obviously it's not arts and humanities, but it's drawings, it's people, it's text, right? So that's actually the thing we want to see, right? Basically, people going deeper than they have gone a couple of years ago. This is the attendee geography. This is a little bit a sad picture because, so basically we moved to the US. Last year we were in Europe. And so basically there were less people in the US, and today there is even less people from Europe, which is actually, I think, due to the flight prices, because my flight was, I think, like twice as expensive as last year. But you can see, if you look at the people interested in the website, and these are really the people who get the email, they have the entire information, and they really are so interested that they are thinking about submitting. So basically then they look up the website, and here you can see we have the entire academic world of both Europe and the US, plus some, and it's very faint, plus some Brazil and Argentina. We have actually Japan, Korea, and China, and Australia, and Malaysia. And so the interesting thing is there is obviously room to spread. There is a high correlation with where the money is, I think. But nevertheless, we can see we also conquered the Midwest and the West Coast this year. And there is a stable interest all over Europe. And forget about the really large circles. This is where the conference takes place and where the guy who edits the web page sits. So that's me. So, and this is the thing, the devolution over time of the interest in the website. This is last year, and you can see this is 40 about. So this is really the people who submit, who take, who basically take part in the call, and then you have this one spike. This is the people registering for the event for the seats, right? So this year we have an entirely different picture. So this is the actual call for paper. So there's way more attention here. So now we are close to 200 here. And this is basically where the decision is coming out and where the ebook is published and so on. But what's really interesting is that basically once we sent out the call, the program, and when people could register, this is a spike which collapses very much, but here you have basically a really smooth decay which is dispersed by beacons, and this is actually how this should look like. So there is a more sustained kind of interest going on here. And I think this is due to the part that we actually not only do the satellite events, but we also actually go on and then publish the stuff and make a package bringing the stuff together, so people can actually see where this disparate field, which I will go into detail a little bit more, how that combines, right? And so one thing we do is a special section, Leonardo Journal, and for the speakers and keynotes, we actually have a number of copies here of the last issue, which by coincidence has a network picture here because there's also a long article this time. So we have 3 issues with special section articles and 1 editorial, and we actually combine them to an ebook, which is an initiative of Roger Malina together with MIT Press to have, basically it's an experimental publishing experiment, where basically we take the articles which are spread out through the journal, coming from different disciplines, putting them into one ebook in lieu of, say, a journal which we would start up for this kind of emerging field, right? And basically this is not only the first article collection on arts and humanities, it's actually a growing article collection. So I think today or yesterday the 2nd version went up, which also includes the abstracts, and obviously the 3rd version will include the articles of today's contributions. One thing, so basically, obviously, this is the result of a radar experiment, right? So we set out the call for papers, and as an art historian, for example, I obviously have no idea what's going on in Japanese literature history, and I have no idea what's going on in linguistic networks and whatsoever. So basically, we use this, and then with the articles coming in, we actually found out there is 5 self-emerging kind of attractors or topics which are not really buckets, right? There's a lot of interconnection and people do a lot of things at the same time, which we could call networks in the arts, networks in the humanities, networks in culture, research and network visualization, and art about networks. And let me show you a little bit what that is. So we have this website, which is a companion website to the ebook, where you can see the abstracts and a little cartoon figure for everything. So this is networks in art, which is more or less the art history or basically the investigation of networks, say in music, in art, in painting, and so on, but also includes people like Mashunas, who was an artist, who basically documented the world in this kind of fold-out book structures, which is nothing less than a complex network of, in this case, communist regimes. This is networks in the humanities, which is where we have much more contributions, which is due to the fact that this is a very hip topic, as digital humanities, which is somehow usurpated by textual research, actually goes more and more into visualization and networks. So here we have a lot of papers, actually counter to what I call networks in culture, and that's actually it's an accidental term somehow. Basically, this should be as full. Culture is something which is not, people are not aware of that, I think. There is a branch of the humanities, like archaeology, anthropology, and so on, where people actually have a very strong focus on objects, so they don't work with texts, and that brings with you a dating problem and a geography problem. So most of the time they draw maps and they do timelines, and actually there is a whole set of work which is just like social network analysis going on since 60 years, where people actually do matrix clustering and diagonalization and whatever since ever. And here we have an interesting paper this year. And then the 4th area is research and network visualization, which is very important. And as a humanities person, as an art historian, for example, I do a lot of time I do critique of some paintings and visualizations whatsoever. And if I do a visualization myself, I also have to critique it, right? So this is a layer which we think fits naturally in this kind of context, but obviously in the same time, this is also a problem people at the main NetSci conference have. And obviously design, information design is making huge strides in this kind of field. I think we're still in the age of pre-Uccello or Giotto in terms of like the development of perspective. So there's a lot of things going on. It's growing explosively, and every month there is something new, some new thing coming up, which people 5 years ago said it's never possible. You just can't do it, right? And finally, the last thing is obviously networks in art, which is people doing artworks with networks. So let me go quickly through the program. We have 4 sections. We're in the middle of the first. Then we have 2 coffee breaks, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. And actually, so there's coffee outside during the breaks. At lunch, we invite the speakers and the organizers for lunch. And for the rest, we recommend to get lunch on your own. And I will point at the lunch break where you might find something. And so basically, in between, we have our program. And here, the second set is a set of contributor talks. The third set is 2 keynotes after the lunch break, so we hope you come back. And the fourth section is actually 2 more contributor talks plus our panel discussion. And just let me go through it. Obviously, you heard Roger and myself. The next talk coming up is Pedro Jano, who is actually an entrepreneur, who is an electrical engineer, if I'm right, who has a background in network science, whose computers listen to radio stations in 50 countries, counting the number of songs playing, selling that to the rights owners, and basically doing a cultural service so the artists actually get their money, right? And that company broke even and whatsoever. So this is a really good example to answer the question of my grandmother, how could you earn money with the humanities, right? So. Then the next section is 4 contributed talks, and here we're very sad that actually James Ennis cannot make it because his wife actually got a medical poisoning by medication, so she was very critical until 2 days ago. She seems to be stable right now, but obviously she couldn't leave Boston, and obviously our hearts are with them. And but we came up with basically a replacement, and I'm very happy about the replacement. These is 2 people, Jan Jolan and Sebastian Arnold, which I had the pleasure to work with. And they're not only outstanding multidisciplinary scientists, they're also very cool people who are interested in everything, which is something which is very much to aspire to. And this paper actually was published in Scientific Reports, which is in the Nature letter on the bottom, but actually this was the most downloaded paper of all Nature publications in December 2011. So they got replaced. And so it was downloaded, I think, like over 100,000 times, if I'm right. So every molecular cook and every aspiring molecular cook is downloading this paper. And yeah, it will give us some interesting answers. This is a paper by Marco Büchler, Greg Crane, and Gerhard Heyer, which looks at historical relevance feedback detection by text reuse mining. And that's very interesting. This is from a group from Leipzig, and actually Greg Crane just joined there as a Alexander von Humboldt professor. So he was one of the most outstanding figures of digital humanities in the US, and now he's one of the most outstanding figures of digital humanities in Germany. And this is actually, in the humanities, I think an Alexander von Humboldt professorship is as close as you could get to Nobel Prize or Fields Medal, right? So I'm really happy to have that paper here. The next paper is by Katharina Zweig, which is about human navigation in complex networks. And if I understood the abstract right, this is actually an application of an algorithm which comes from transportation planning, which is also applicable in the humanities, which is a very interesting thing to have this really very, very direct multidisciplinary things. Next paper is Network Science and Literature History by Hoyt Long and Sean So, which is interesting. It's about Japanese literature, which I'm in contact actually with a couple of people, which is a very, very rapidly growing field, which is interesting because in Western literature, you still have this kind of resentments of a stratum of people who don't really believe in quantification, and there it seems to be moving much faster. Then after the lunch break, we have a keynote by Burak Ari Khan, who is an artist who was at MIT, now is an artist in Istanbul and New York. And basically, he does art with networks, very awesome art with networks, and take a look into that. And the next keynote is by Miriam Maya from the University of Utah. She has been at the Broad Institute before. She will talk about designing visualizations for biological research. And the interesting thing there is it's not only quantity, it's also quality, right? So basically, there's always this problem of the designer to not only do quantitative decisions, but also do qualitative decisions. And that's sometimes very hard to get across with the natural science crowd, in a sense. Then in the last section, there will be 2 more papers, one by Nankao and Yuru Lin, which is I categorize it here as research in network visualization. It's not actually true. This is one of the most interdisciplinary papers because it looks at the spread of information across Twitter in a geographical sense, in a temporal sense, and obviously this is across people, so there's all the dimensions you have in the humanities, right? And so we're very much looking forward into that. And the last paper is actually by Elia Meeks. Elia Meeks is what I think is an understatement. He's called the digital humanities specialist at Stanford University, which, temporary, which the interesting thing there is he is developing GFI plugins and useful tools for digital humanities related to networks and geography in a pace which is really breathtaking. And there's a lot of interesting things coming out there, and he does an awesome job and actually get the message out to humanities people to enable them to analyze their own data. And what he looks here to, he will present an utterly successful project, which was really a success disaster in his own words, going across the digital humanities community, where he looks at like, what does it cost to go from A to B in the Roman world? And it's one of these visualizations, like we had keynotes in Martin Wattenberg and Fernanda Viegas before in our symposium series, where they did things very similar, where basically it's not only about having data doing a visualization, it's about having data doing a visualization in a way that people can interact and actually do their own kind of micro-reading of what's going on, right? Because doing this map is one thing, but say, hey, I do research about Ephesus, and how do these people relate to the guys over there in Tarragona, right? So that's the actual thing we really want to be able to use that in the same way we have used atlases and stuff. And then finally, and finally, we will end with a podium discussion, and this panel discussion is on the place of arts and humanities in complex network research. And I'm very, very happy about the people on the panel. It's Julio Tinio, who is the dean I introduced before, who will be on the panel, and it's Abed Laszlo Barabasi, where I probably don't have to lose any words. He's very multidisciplinary, and he's a co-chair of NetSci 2012. And he will be accompanied by Peter Holme, who is also a very awesome interdisciplinary physicist, from the University of Umea, who will be a co-chair of NetSci 2013. So these are the right people to ask the questions I'm going to ask. And then obviously I will have Isabel Mireles on the panel, who will basically bring the information design perspective, and Christian Hueb, who will also bring his experience of being 50% music artist and 50% complex system scientist, which is complex system science is a related field to complex networks, not exactly the same, but is nevertheless very, very interesting to have that basically point of view in the panel. And these are the questions. I just go across them very quickly, so you have an idea of what, maybe think a little bit about it. We'll only read the fat part. How would you locate arts and humanities within or in relation to complex network research or complexity science in general? So basically, what's the place of that? What are the practical needs and risks of crossing the respective disciplinary boundaries? And whoever is working in that area, I do this since my PhD, which I did my PhD in art history, changing midway to complex networks, then meeting Laszlo Barabasi and working in his lab for 3 years. I know what I'm talking about. This is the risks and the needs are really risky. So we're talking about doing something which people in the humanities fields say it's suicide to pursue, right? Because there is too many people who will give you bad reviews by just not believing in quantification. So this is something I think we need to talk about. And then the third thing is envisioning dedicated multidisciplinary curricula that would integrate arts and humanities with complex network research and complexity science in general. What particular aspects or modules should be dedicated? Should such dedicated multidisciplinary curricula contain? I think this is also a very important question because obviously, if you want to go from STEM to STEAM, this is exactly the thing we need to solve. And then obviously the most obvious question is, should the established list of NetSci disciplines in NetSci, right, in a conference, be amended with Common Arts and Humanities? So should there be papers, more arts and humanities paper in the conference itself? And with that, I'd like to introduce Pedro, and maybe we just attach his computer, and yeah, wish you fun and entertainment and insight in this day. So, thanks.